So, hello, Professor Anwar. How are
Hi.
you doing?
Very good. Very good. How are you?
All good. Thank you so much for taking the time. Just a quick introduction about us. I'm sure you know us as your students, but we are also involved in a business publication called Business Tomorrow. We seek to democratize the discourse around business and Canadian industry. I think there's a lot of discourse about American industry, not as much about Canadian industry. That too, with the interaction of young people and young students. So that's our initiative, and it'll be a success if we can transfer some of your wisdom to our listeners there. And so, without further ado, we can begin.
Sure.
So, sir, firstly, you seem to have it all. You've had a successful career, you're loved by your students. What if you were to walk us through your life journey, what brings you to where you are today?
Well, I guess on the paper it looks like everything is great, but behind it there's a lot of failures, things that didn't work out. You try something, you do something else. So there is there's a lot of that. It's not linear. You don't always start and just go up. There's a lot of steps back. Um, I think probably work ethic is a big part of it. I mean, it doesn't really matter what career, whether you're an engineer, finance, want to be a doctor. Um, I think the ones that end up doing well probably share that common trait. So, so I'd say that is a big part of it, and then also not letting the negative parts of life keep you down, because they will come.
So, I know that you studied at Rotman in your young days, and if you could walk me through sort of how that journey went about and what came after Rotman for you.
Okay. Yeah, so that was one of those scenarios that I sort of talked about. I did my commerce degree here at U of T. I At that time I thought I was pretty focused. I wanted to do my CA, which is a CPA now. I thought I'll be a partner at one of the big firms. They make a lot of money, and they do. So everything was going well. I was doing well in the program. Third year, I had an internship at KPMG. So I was lined up to do very well. And after, I guess, like 2 months, 3 months of working there in the summer, I realized this is not for me. Third year university, your life plan has changed. You don't know what you want to do. So I had a bit of a dilemma. I started applying to MBA schools. I thought I want to do something in business. I don't know exactly what, maybe finance or something else. So just as life worked out, I ended up getting into a couple of schools, U of T and other places. Ivy gave me deferred admission. They said go work for 3 years, then you start. So then I did do my CPA because I had to work somewhere, and then I left. And mainly because I wanted to transition my career. So I guess when you're 18 or 19, you might think you want to know what you want to do for the next 40 years, and then 2 years later things change and you keep adjusting, and that happened several times throughout my career. So that was probably the biggest one early on.
And what made you decide to join teaching? Because you talked about, pursuing a career as a CPA and in finance, and that has all the big money and glamour, and teaching, which is I think one of the most noble professions in the world, seems to be less glamorous from the outside, from the corporate world. So, what made you want to join, the teaching stream?
So I actually have always liked teaching. When I was an undergrad here, I was a teaching assistant for economics, so I used to do tutorials. And my professor said to me after the second year, she said, you should look at becoming a professor. She was a very well-renowned person in her field. She said, you'll love it. I've really enjoyed my job. I love research. And then I thought about it, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not good at research. I like teaching, but research is a big part of being a professor. And then greed got the better part of me, and I thought, well, I'll go in the corporate world, I'll make more money, and teaching just sort of became a side hobby. So I've taught at a variety of places. I taught the securities course, I've taught at Seneca College, and then at the university level, Queens, McMaster, and here at U of T as well. So teaching is just a hobby. could I have done it full time? I could have, but I don't think I would have been a great professor from a tenured point of view, because you have to be a published researcher, and that's not really what interested me.
So that's very interesting, and I agree with you because I have had the fortune of studying from many finance professors, but you stood out for me, and you actually made the interest of finance come in for me at least. Particularly your YouTube videos and the way you explain concepts. The difficult concepts you can explain in a very simple manner, and I think that's a hallmark of a great professor who has had industry experience. So I completely agree, sir. It's really added to you. And now I see that you're also at Harvard. You're doing educational degree there. You're learning,
Right.
and that's a very uncommon, path to be a professor, be so accomplished in your career, and then go to learn something new. So, what made you decide to do that?
Yeah, so Harvard is the first time I've done an educational program just for interest. I'm doing my master's in history. Uh, it will not help me in my career, has no relevance to anything other than that. I just have liked history, so I wanted to do it. It works out because I can do most of it hybrid. I'll have to do a summer taking courses there. Um, and Harvard only because I had looked at going into Harvard many years ago when I was doing my MBA, but finances made that decision really quick that I wasn't going to go to Harvard. So, so I thought, hey, now I get an opportunity where I could and study something I like. So that's why I'm doing that.
Very interesting. And your experience throughout this whole journey of teaching, learning, and being a practitioner in the field, what is one learning that you would give back to people like us, young people who are just embarking on it? And I know you mentioned earlier that life is not linear, and oftentimes you have the ups and downs. And I feel for our generation, we take them quite seriously. I think we take because of social media or something else, when we're seeing every success story around us, we take it quite significantly. Each failure we take to heart. And what's your advice on all this?
Yeah, things are a lot more competitive now than when I was a student here. A lot of my friends at that time said I was very focused, competitive, and I thought I was, but if I was to compare what I was to the students today, it is not at that level. I mean, I had a goal, I wanted to work towards it, but I think now sometimes it's a bit unhealthy as well. I don't think someone at this age should be that stressed about getting an internship at company X, because if you get it, great. If not, so what? There's thousands of companies out there. There's different careers. It just sort of psychologically has become that for me to be happy, I need to be an investment banker or a consultant, and that may be the case or it may not. So I think the advice I give to folks studying now is it's good to work hard and have some direction, but don't overstress yourself on the short-term goals. Like if this doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. Just keep shifting to something else.
Yeah, and kind of following up on that question, what would you say for you that you would look into for students that are applying for internships or graduate roles that you think that stands out in this very competitive market?
So I mean, I'm different than maybe others. I would say I'd be interested in anyone who's got a work ethic and shows genuine passion for something. And that's something that you figure out when you meet with someone. Like if you say, I joined Club X, Club Y, I was president of this, that's great, but it's another thing if someone says, I love hockey and I started a program where I coached underprivileged kids or something like that. You can see there's some passion involved in that. So something that was done from the heart tends to distinguish people more than padding a resume line item by X club or not.
Yeah, kind of going back to you kind of you mentioned that teaching is like a hobby for you,
Mm-hmm.
but how is your kind of experience teaching? How does did that have any impact in your work in the corporate sector?
Not directly. Like, I mean, I don't teach for the corporate sector. I mean, clients sometimes are impressed if you're a professor, just as the psychology of it, but it doesn't actually have a direct relationship. I think the two are kind of completely different. It is like golfing, except nobody's going to pay me money to golf.
It gives you patience. It gives you patience when dealing with clients, I'm sure.
Yeah, it does. In a way, probably the only translation has been the ability to teach here or anywhere else is also useful when you're dealing with a client in terms of advising how to invest money. You're sort of teaching them on what their options are and recommending something and explaining why. So that's the only translation, I'd say.
Talking about investments, I know many of our young viewers do either like investing already or want to enter the realm of investing, whether it's just through buying some stocks or something else. What advice would you have for them, keeping in mind that perhaps many of them aren't finance students?
Right. I'd say if you want to invest and you're sort of doing something, I'll quote Warren Buffett, if you're investing and having fun, you're doing it wrong. So I'd say have fun early. When you don't have a lot of money and you invest, if you lose your money on cryptocurrency X, life goes on. But when you're close to retirement and you lose your money on cryptocurrency X, life may not go on the same way. So, at some point when someone gets serious, investing becomes very boring. And I get that a 20-year-old is not going to want to invest something with an outlook 30 years down the road. You want some immediate return. So if you want to try it out, that's great, but I think it's really unrealistic to assume that you would consistently do well over time. When I was in my 20s, I did it. I made good amounts of money on some trades, and then I lost money on others, and I no longer do it. So that that shows you how the net was. So usually the advice I'd give is if you're planning for something like a long-term goal, then you got to do it a boring way. Put X dollars aside. Probably the most useful book I've read, it's a very overly simplified book in Canada on investing, is The Wealthy Barber, okay, by David Chilton. It's just a story he writes about how a barber saved up enough money and became a wealthy person. And initially people sort of dismissed the book, but it was actually used as the text in my MBA program in the investment course. So it has a lot of very useful fundamental principles, and it's written for someone who has no knowledge of finance whatsoever. So it's a good book to read, and it's really small too. So.
What's your investment philosophy?
So my philosophy, basically, mine is different than others.
Yeah.
Okay? So my clients, myself, more conservative. I want to make sure that I get the market return plus a little bit more, not a lot more. If I just wanted the market return, I'd buy an exchange-traded fund. I'm not trying to pick the next Microsoft. I don't think I can. And if you get the wrong one, lots of bad things can happen. So my philosophy is figure out where you want to go, decide how much you need to be saving to get there, and then invest it conservatively. It would be a shame to say, I needed to go here, I need to start investing this amount, and you did all of that, and you lost it all because the company you invested in went bankrupt. There's a few decades gone.
So what would you consider most important for a young person like us who wants to build long-term wealth? And I think while there is a decent amount of people who want quick returns, a lot of Gen Zs are looking forward to build their long-term wealth. I feel people have become very financially literate over the last few years. And so for us who want to build long-term wealth, what would you say should be our first steps? Would you say invest in ETFs and see the cumulative returns come there, or would you say invest in some other strategy?
So I'll quote Buffett. I go along with him in that scenario. If someone says how should I invest, he'll say buy an ETF, a Vanguard ETF. He's obviously not going to say buy my company, but basically you have to make the decision: can I beat the market or not? Consistently, not on 1 year. If you can beat the market consistently, then there's a very lucrative career as a portfolio manager waiting for you. You'll make millions of dollars just doing that. Very few people ever do. So if you can't, then the market does pretty well. The Canadian market does about 8% a year, and that doubles every what, 9 years or so. So if you do that in the long term, that would be a good thing to do. I think if you pick a strategy where you think you're going to beat the market, then unfortunately things won't work out as well as you hoped. And if you're young, fine. If you continue that strategy for 30 years, it's not great.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Warren Buffett. What makes him unique? Why aren't there multiple Warren Buffetts out there? What do you think he does that's different than other people?
So I guess now, Warren Buffett now, or his company, I mean, he's not really buying the stocks as much, is different than when he started. Now he's a name, so when they buy something, that prices go up right off the bat. But when he started the company, they weren't prominent. They just decided they were going to invest. It was sort of like a mutual fund that was going to go for the long term. They had the benefit that all of their investors follow the same thing. They don't do quarterly earnings calls or things like that. So they just took the short-term focus out of it. And he would never really even talk about short-term. So the difference between him and most others are he, in his mind, has a 5-10 year horizon to look at returns, where everyone else has, the market puts pressure on you to talk about quarterly returns. And when you look at quarterly returns, you become short-term focused. And it can work well or not.
So the main takeaway from that, I feel, is look at the long term and invest in ETFs when you can, because it's hard to beat the market consistently.
Yeah, and don't try to jump in and out, because what the worst thing is, somebody says, oh, I got out of the market before the crash, but then you got to get back in, and then you got to get back out again. You just, fund managers don't go in and out.
Yeah, so when you're looking at kind of this year, and like the next year for this, like both the Canadian and U.S. markets, how do you kind of see it moving, especially kind of with the election coming up, both the Canadian as well as the U.S. election in the next?
So I think this is my personal opinion. Elections don't seem to impact the markets as much as more boring stuff. Like if you look at what was really impacted the market, 2 years ago interest rates were raised and the market went down dramatically. And that is what happens. Elections, I mean, Trump was elected before and the world went on. So elections don't happen have as much of an impact unless the person coming in is going to do something dramatic, like say, I will cancel trade with everyone or something like that.
Or 60% tariff.
Yes, on everything. Like maybe if you're picking on the electric vehicle industry, that's one thing. But if you were to say I'm going to double taxes or I'm going to start spending, then that would impact stuff. But both U.S. and Canada do have sort of that little limiting thing in their political systems where you can't do anything. Like the president does need approval from Congress and Senate, and so that keeps things somewhat more reasonable.
And I mean, you manage and you have managed wealth of many, high net worth individuals in the past. And recently I was reading a statistics from Statistics Canada that the income disparity between the richest 2/5 and the lowest 2/5 has increased by, I think, to around 49 percentage points now. The highest it's been in Canada in the recent history. US, it's worse. What are the rich people doing that perhaps average folks like ourselves aren't doing in the investment strategies, and are there things that we could incorporate in our own strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the demographic breakdown, but I'd say a chunk of them were rich because their mom and dad were rich, and that just continued on. So there's not much you can do there, but probably people who are more well off. It tends to be people who've had some sort of businesses and built wealth that way, and then when they do, they become generally fairly conservative. They don't gamble a lot of their money. So probably their gamble was starting their business and working hard, and when that gamble paid off, they keep it safe. I remember reading an article years ago with Bill Gates' financial advisor, and they asked him, so it must be a cool job. How do you invest Bill Gates' money? And he said, no, it's very boring. You just buy T-bills because 95% of his wealth is in one company. So we have to just keep it safe, whatever he has. So rich people, that's been one of the downsides of, this is more economics, I guess, but people say, well, if you lower taxes, it'll encourage the wealthy to reinvest more of their savings. And what they found is they don't do that. They just continue to hoard and reinvest it in conservative things, and it grows. But for their wealth grows, but the economy doesn't.
As of October 24th, as we're recording this podcast,
Mhm.
what's new in the Canadian and US market?
New in what sense?
New in, in terms of new entrants, new pulls and pushes of the market. Just, the key things, if you were to tell our, customers who are looking at it, our viewers who look at it a month or a year from now,
Yeah.
what's happening right now?
So there's still a lot of question marks. I mean, it seems optimistic. I never try to predict 12 months because I'm wrong as often as I'm right. But it seems optimistic only because rates are starting to go down. We've passed COVID. Inflation is under control. So all of those signs are good for both Canada and US. As long as something terrible doesn't come along. I mean, no one predicted COVID, and these kinds of things do happen. But the markets are in pretty decent shape, at least the large blue chip companies. So it's I don't get the feeling that we're in some sort of crazy bubble like we were in 2007.
AI isn't a
Correct,
bubble?
yeah.
Do you think AI?
AI might be overhyped, like a lot of technology does get overhyped, but you never know when that hype will stop. And so that hype may continue for years, and then it'll come. And will it come crashing completely down? Maybe, maybe not. But AI is a small part of the economy. It's not really even part of the Canadian economy, probably a bit more in the US.
I had an interesting conversation with someone from the Fisher Investment Group in the US. I was talking to them whether AI is a bubble, and they said, look, a key way to tell whether AI is or whether anything is a bubble or not is to say that, is everyone thinking that this is going to be the next big thing? So the key is, if you think it's a bubble, it's probably not a bubble. I wasn't old enough in 2008, but the vast majority of the people thought it was just a boom, and you weren't in a bubble, and it ended up being a bubble, or even the tech bubble of early 2000s. So I feel that now, the fact that a lot of people are conservative, I feel Warren Buffett has liquidated a lot of his investments into cash now, shows that perhaps that conservatism is there, which will prevent a bubble from actually emerging and bursting.
Right. And AI, I'm not a tech expert, but I'll say there are some parables to the internet world. When the internet first came out, everyone thought this is the greatest thing ever, life will change. Maybe it didn't change as much as they had thought, but it did change. Like, lots of stuff became available that did not exist 20 years ago. AI will probably be in the same category, that it may be not living up to all the hype, but it will do a lot of things that were not done pre-AI.
Yeah, and kind of going upon AI, are you kind of trying to implement AI into your specific investment strategies in terms of using more quantitative approaches, or are you more of a qualitative?
For me, it's qualitative, so it would be less of an impact on my personal business. I could see how some investment advisors or portfolio managers might use it more if they're doing things like technical analysis or stuff like that. Then AI would be very useful. But for my niche of the practice, it's less useful.
So then, in terms of the qualitative aspect, what are like the key indicators that you look at that makes you decide to invest in?
Basically, like cash flows. Like, I use portfolio managers, and the managers will tend to use cash flows from companies that are blue chip, dividend type companies that have existing operations that will continue in the future. AI has great future hope, but it really doesn't have existing operations that are profitable.
But anyways, sir, thank you so much for taking the
Sure.
time. I think it was a privilege for us to talk to you and for our viewers to listen to you. Any closing thoughts and perhaps a quote that you have that you'd like to share to?
Yeah, I don't know that I've got a quote offhand, but one closing thought is you guys live in a greater generation. I guess every generation will say that to the next. You have access to the internet, to YouTube. You can learn anything in the world you want. So, if you're, embarking on financial investing, all the information is out there. So it's a great opportunity. It's not like 50 years ago where you had to have money to hire an advisor to give you some counsel. So it's good to have the opportunity to educate yourself, and hopefully that translates into more wealth for the next generation.
And just a plug in there, Professor Anwar has a great YouTube channel which increases your knowledge on finance. So do follow that, and you can learn more there.
Yeah, if you're studying for a finance course, it's great. Otherwise, I'll leave you to be the judge.
No, but thank you so much, sir. It was a great
Okay,
privilege.
my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.